You Booked It, episode 74. Hey, entertainers and performers of the world. I'm your host, Dane Reese, and welcome to You Booked It, where I chat with inspiring entertainment professionals 7 days a week. By digging into their journey, we're going to discover everything you need to do to have a successful entertainment career. You know, because training usually skips that part about how to actually make your skills work for you in the real world. Fellow entertainers, my drive here at You Booked It is to share the inspiring and incredible journeys of successful entertainment professionals. We're here to support your journey. So go to youbookeditpodcast.com and join the You Booked It email community, where we dig deep into truly actionable things you can be doing right now to book that next audition, submission, or gig. If you enjoy this free podcast, please show your support and search for You Booked It on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app, where you can subscribe so you don't miss an episode, leave a rating, and review. And now, let's do this. Okay, let's get started. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Justin Sargent. Are you ready for this, Justin?
Oh, more than you know, Dane.
Let's do it. Justin has starred as Peter Parker in the Broadway blockbuster Spider-Man: Turn Off the Dark, drew in Rock of Ages, and was in the original cast of Bonnie and Clyde. Regional credits include West Side Story, where he played Tony, Baz, where he played Christian, Love Actually Live, where he played Mark, Pippin, where he played Pippin, The Rocky Horror Show, Riff Raff, Forever Plaid, Jinx, and many others. Developmental theater includes Brave New World and workshops for Bliss, Joan of Arc, Into the Fire, Oswald, Clowntown, Super U, The View Upstairs, Into the Wild, Bat Out of Hell, and many more. TV includes Jesus Christ Superstar live on NBC, Law and Order SVU, Mr. Robot, Royal Pains, and Delocated. Film includes Big Exit, Storm Chasers, No One Called Ahead. Justin is developing a new musical with the band Air Supply and has also performed across the country singing the music of Queen with a live symphony. He holds a BFA in musical theater from the University of Central Florida. Justin, that is a quick intro of who you are and what you've done, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Fill in the gaps, who you are, where you're from, where you're currently calling home, and a little bit more about what you do as a professional in the entertainment industry.
Of course. And I do want to preface this by saying that my least favorite subject is myself. So I apologize if I get too brief to elaborate. I don't mind, but I tend to truncate things. So please, if you want to stay on top of me, I totally get it. But yeah, so I grew up in the Central Florida area. I grew up in Tampa Bay area. I had moved to a new town in the middle of 8th grade. And as a way to kind of meet new people and kind of integrate myself into a community, I joined the community theater at the suggestion of my history teacher, actually, because she was part of the local theater. And so I auditioned for Oliver, and I fell in love with it and just kept going. And I think I did something like 25 productions at the community theater through my high school career for the next 4 years, and just, like on stage, off stage, running the light board, soundboard, all that kind of stuff, and just absolutely fell in love with the art form. And I had there's no question that that's how I wanted to spend my life and my career. And so I got a BFA degree in musical theater from the University of Central Florida, like you said, and worked at the theme parks there in Florida for a few years. Except for Disney. Disney wouldn't hire me. They said I was too edgy, whatever that means. I know, right? So, gosh. And so from there, through a series of extreme luck and circumstances, I'm sure we can get into a little later, I ended up booking the understudy for Constantine Maroulis in Rock of Ages on Broadway after it had been open for about a year and a half or so. And this is all happening kind of out of Orlando. And so I moved to New York City, and just kind of after 9 months of living in the city was just all of a sudden in this Broadway show. I was like, whoa, what is happening? And I had long hair and I could sing rock music really high, and that was kind of my thing. And so it was just kind of right place, right time. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. And I just kind of got really lucky with that foot in the door, and from there, I've been fortunate enough to have taken over the role of Drew in that show, playing that role for close to 600 performances. I think it's like 550 performances.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And then Spider-Man: Turn Off the Dark it was running at the time, and so Reeve Carney was leaving the show, and so I auditioned and got the role of Peter Parker and left Rock of Ages to go do that show. And then when that show closed, and in between then, I did this very short-lived show called Bonnie and Clyde. It was a Frank Wildhorn show, one of the shorter Broadway runs. It was, I think we did 30 performances after previews, but it's become something of like a cult classic. Like I do a lot of master classes for for high school students and college students. They all know the show. They all love the show. I'm like, really? Because we only ran for 30. Where were you guys when we were running? Like, why didn't you come see it? That kind of thing. And so, so then Bonnie and Clyde, Spider-Man, and then just, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been, my career path has been on the trajectory of starting off as an understudy in a swing and kind of taking over principal roles. And so now I'm really focusing the last 5 years on originating a role. And that's kind of been my passion and my path. And so I've been doing a lot of workshops, a lot of developmental productions of new shows. We were 2 weeks away from rehearsals for a brand new show in which I was going to originate my first role, and COVID happened. And so that's kind of a quick run through of my journey so far, but I'm sure there's things that I missed.
Totally. I love it. Well, let's move on to this next section. And Justin, look, I am a sucker for a good quote. What is your favorite quote you'd like to share with everyone?
It's so funny you asked that, because I was born in Southern Illinois, and I moved to Florida when I was very young, but most of my family still lives there. And my grandfather has like 38 acres of woods that he and his wife have made all these paths in, and like kind of, carved out all these really cool paths and little like nooks and crannies. And along those paths, they have taken different plates and stop signs and like all kinds of like bizarre signs, and they have posted quotes on trees all over those woods. So you can kind of like go through these paths and, you see all these really inspirational quotes. Some of them are funny and silly, but some of them are inspirational. And my favorite quote has always been, "Don't look behind. You're not going that way. Don't look back. You're not going that way." You know what I mean? So it kind of is a reminder to stop, focusing so much on the past and just really focus on what's coming next, and always thinking forward. And that for some reason, it was just always, it has stuck with me, that quote.
Absolutely. And are you able to maybe reference any specific time in your career where that quote really played a part in your life?
Yeah, so one of the most difficult things for actors, and I'm sure you know this, or performers in general, is when you audition for something, there's that nagging, that question. Oh my God, how did it go? I wonder how it went. Am I going to get a phone call? This kind of thing. And so when that kind of the anxiety comes up, I remember that quote, and it helps me kind of alleviate a little bit of that anxiety. Just kind of go, nope, don't worry about it. It happened. It's done. Don't focus so much on it. It's in the past. Let's think about the future. So it's kind of therapeutic in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. And it's sometimes that is easier said than done, but the more you practice it, the more you go, just let things go after they've done, because really, truly, you can't do anything about what's already happened. So
100%.
Just move on and try to get out of your head. And the more you practice that, the easier it gets.
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful. Well, let's move on to the next section now. And Justin, of course, you are an entertainer. I am an entertainer, and I think that you'd agree. This industry is one of the most subjective, brutally honest, personally emotional industries in existence. And you know as well as I that in order to create and have a successful career in this industry like you're having now takes a lot of dedication and hard work. And while, there is an outrageous amount of fun and excitement doing what we do, there are also our fair share of obstacles, challenges, and failures we are going to experience and we're going to have to move forward through. So tell us, what is one key challenge, obstacle, or failure you've experienced in your career, and how did you come out the other side better because of it?
Great question. I have a couple, actually. One of my biggest obstacles, and I hope this isn't taken the wrong way, because I certainly don't think that this is everybody's journey. This just happened to be my journey. When I was younger, I weighed about 100 pounds more than I do now. all through high school. I was over 240 pounds as a 15-year-old. I played a lot of character roles, which I love doing, and I still love doing. I love, like Riff Raff is one of my favorite roles of all time. I played Nicely Johnson in high school, excuse me. And so those kind of, funny, chubby guy roles were the things that I kind of started me off in this business. And as I started to really want to explore, I don't want to, I hate to use the word leading man because it's just such a pretentious term. You know what I mean? But but unfortunately that is the term. As I started to want to explore those roles, it dawned on me that there were no roles for leading men that were overweight, and even shows like Hairspray, that there were roles for this amazing role for this young woman who was overweight, and I was like, oh, that is amazing, that's awesome. But there were no roles for men that were overweight. They all had to be slender and muscular and tall and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, okay. So wanting to be as versatile as possible and wanting to be as kind of, I guess, marketable as possible, I had some advice that was given to me to lose the weight, and I did, and I lost the weight too quickly. And so then I had a lot of kind of, loose skin and stretch marks. And so then there was a whole new thing to kind of be concerned about when, you know what I mean? It was a very, very tough obstacle to overcome. And I would actually say that it is still something that I have a difficult time with, is body image. And a lot of people that know me, they kind of think, "What, really? Are you serious?" Because we would never guess that, but it's definitely true. And the other obstacle that I've had to kind of deal with and still have to deal with is that I tend to fit in between a lot of different categories. It's funny. I get this weird comparison to Aaron Tveit, and then I also get this weird comparison to Reeve Carney, and I kind of fit somewhere in between them because I kind of look like both of them smashed together in some weird way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I primarily do rock musicals, and that's what I want to do. I want to do rock musicals. I grew up listening to rock music, so I've got this weird kind of specific thing that I'm trying to market, and I'm either too Aaron for that role or too Reeve for this role. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where it's kind of led me down this path of, well, then I'm going to have to create my own roles. You know what I mean? Because it's starting to get a little ridiculous having to choose one of those paths to go down. So yeah, those are kind of the two largest obstacles I've had to face so far. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on to this next section and to a time that I like to call your spotlight moment. That one moment in time you realized, yes, I am going to be an entertainer for a living, or maybe it was, yes, this is what I need to be doing as an entertainer. Tell us about that.
So it was 9/11, quite honestly. And I know that's such a bizarre answer, but at that point, I had been doing community theater for about a year and a half. And we were doing Your Good Man, Charlie Brown. And it was our opening night was on September 11, 2001. It was our first performance with an audience. And we decided to go ahead and do the show. It was a Tuesday night, and we had a full house. And I think I was too young to really understand what it meant to have the cathartic experience of going to the theater and escaping from the realities of the world. I kind of always knew what that meant, but on a day like September 11th, it was something that these people needed and we needed as performers to be able to go through it, especially with such a charming show like You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. It's so lovely and sweet, and you can just kind of sit there and smile and just enjoy yourself for 2 hours. And that night I remember going, wow, this is not only did I give myself something to escape to for a little while in the midst of a national tragedy, but also this audience of I think 250 people in this small community theater. They were laughing and they were enjoying themselves, and they probably went home and cried, and then had to deal with the reality of the day. But for a couple of hours there, it was an escape. And I remember thinking, wow, that's pretty powerful. And I want to do that for the rest of my life. And if I'm performing in a theater where there's 1,600 people sitting there, and one person out there is going through some kind of unimaginable personal tragedy, they may be there because they need to escape for a little bit. And I really enjoy being a part of what provides that escape for them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's quite a bit of relevancy in what you said about needing to find that escape from reality. And live theater in general, I think, does that better than Netflix. Netflix is great, right? But
Come
being
on,
there
Tiger
amongst,
King, come on, man.
yeah, but being there with real people is huge. And, we can look at our time right now amongst all of this COVID stuff. And I know that there's, the logistics of putting a bunch of people into a theater. And then there's the issue of a theater actually being able to be profitable if you are cutting their house by 2/3. And there's all sorts of things to battle logistically. But I think that there is a definite underplay of what it is to be an essential business in this country. And I think entertainment takes a much higher level than I think a lot of people are willing to admit to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It is interesting that there's a bizarre the arts and entertainment are disposable, forms of that are not they're not necessary. I mean, the funding for the arts is a joke. You know what I'm saying? And so, but what happens when there's a pandemic and people are stuck at home? They turn to the arts, and I know that that's an argument that's been made over and over again, and some people find it silly, but I certainly don't. I mean, if everybody that I know or have seen on Facebook even people that aren't involved in the arts at all, like that I went to high school with, they're all watching movies and watching TV shows and reading books. And this is the arts. This is what you turn to in times of crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's piggyback on that spotlight question and let's talk about your number one booked it moment. Walk us through that day, the auditions and callbacks, if they happen to be a part of it. What was going on in your life, and what about that moment makes it your favorite booked it moment?
So mine is actually a little bittersweet because when I was originally called in for Spider-Man, Reeve was still in the show and they had not announced that he was leaving yet. So I was auditioning for his standby is what technically I was auditioning for. And so I had booked that role, and the kind of off the table discussion was, well, Reeve's leaving the show and you will take over for him. However, when they announced he was leaving the show, they decided that there was going to be a nationwide search for the next Spider-Man, for the next Peter Parker. And I was like, what? Like,
Yeah,
wait a
you're like,
minute now.
what do you mean?
I thought this was, and so, of course there was no contract. There was nothing, as far as like me taking over for Reeve officially in an official capacity, I was still technically going in to be the standby. And so at that point it was a little up in the air. And so I was on my honeymoon and I was in Greece and we didn't have, great access to the internet. And it was like our second to last day there after being there for, I think it was like 10 days. And I finally got the message that it had been made official and that they were officially going to offer me the role and not just the standby. And so I
Oh,
was like,
right.
okay, awesome. And it was a huge relief. But for those 8 days before that on my honeymoon, which was amazing, I had this little bit of this nagging thing in the back of my head. It was really hard to let go of, and like that quote wasn't working for me. Don't look in the past.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't look back because you're not going that way. It was just kind of one of those things. It was such a big and personal thing. Nerd and Spider-Man fan, and so like it was such a huge deal for me, and so it was hard to kind of forget about that on my honeymoon. And so thank God I have such an amazing and wonderful partner, and she totally understood. And if there was an opportunity for me to connect to the internet, she'd be like, yeah, sure, go ahead, let's check your messages, let's see. And so she, thank goodness, was very understanding. But yeah, that was that moment where I finally got that word, and just like, and it's funny because you mentioned the booked it moment. I just got a message from my manager that just said booked it. And I was like, oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So it was, like I said, it was kind of bittersweet because I wish I had found out 8 days prior, so I could have really, really, really enjoyed my honeymoon to its full, potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I can only imagine how nerve-wracking that would be. And just that uncertainty, because I can imagine at that point you'd already done so much of the work as well.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Well, glad it all worked out. That's amazing. And let's take a moment to talk about the present. What projects are you working on now? What are you looking forward to? And We've talked about it a little bit. We are amidst this global pandemic. How do you see the entertainment industry moving forward in the next couple of years?
Great question. So, I'm currently so the show that I was about to start rehearsals for is called Super You, and it's been in development for nearly a decade now. And I came on last year to a role that they've kind of had. They just haven't really been able to find exactly what they want the role to be. And so when I came in and auditioned, I brought something, I guess, wholly unique that they didn't exactly know what they wanted. So when I came in the room and gave my interpretation of their material, they were like, "Oh, that's what we want." So
Cool.
I got to have that moment of, "Oh my God, I'm going to get to do this. I'm going to get to actually create something that's like coming from me and collaborating with this amazing creative team." And so it is a phenomenal rock musical all about this young woman who is an incredible comic book artist, and her brother, grew up kind of using comic books and illustrating comic book characters to deal with the hardships of their life. Their parents had, died in a tragedy when they were young, and they were going through foster care, and she was bullied in school, and her older brother kind of inspired her to start writing her own comic book heroes because he had his own that he was working on. And so she created these six, comic book all female comic book heroes that were kind of like aspects of her personality and her life that were things that she didn't naturally possess, and that helped bring those things from inside of her outwards.
Yeah.
And then tragically he dies in a car accident. Her brother dies in a car accident, and so all that work and that kind of creative side of her just goes away, and all those amazing aspects of her personality and her courage and her strength, they just kind of disappear. And she then meets this struggling musician who is just dealing with his own failures, and she starts kind of giving herself fully to him instead of really focusing on herself. And as that's happening, her comic book creations come back to her and remind her what she had fought so hard for to come to realize, and kind of builds her back up in this really, really powerful way. And of course, by the end, she's fully realized, once again, and just like, it's a beautiful story. It's about dealing with loss and tragedy, and how to overcome your biggest anxieties and fears. And also it's a very empowering, story about empowering women. So I'm really, really excited about that, especially having a daughter, and so it's like, this is the kind of stuff I want to be working on. And if you want to go to superyoumusical.com, you can find out all about that production. They've got a bunch of demos on there that are just killer. And so we'll be back up and running as soon as we're allowed to do live theater again in New York City. We are on the slate. We're ready to go. So that one I'm really excited about. And then there's another one that I can't really talk about, but I think there's going to be a press release either tomorrow or the next day, but it involves a very famous composer, in fact, probably the most famous composer of all time, in a new musical about his life and his sister's life. So I think that's probably all I can say about that one.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, let's move on to one of my favorite sections in the interview. I call it the Grease Lightning Round. I am going to ask you a handful of questions. I want you to answer them as quickly and concisely as possible, one after another. Are you ready?
Okay, let's go.
All right, first question. What was the one thing holding you back from committing to a career as an entertainer?
Nothing. Zero.
Second question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Never stop learning.
Love it. And the third question. What is something that is working for you right now? Or, if you'd like to go pre-COVID, what was working for you before our industry went on pause?
Ooh, I would say something that's been working for me recently is saying yes more often.
Great. Yep. I think the yeses definitely need to outweigh the no's, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Perfect. And the fourth question. What is your best resource? Whether that is a book, a movie, a YouTube video, a podcast, maybe a piece of technology that you found is helping your career right now.
Ooh, you know what? I have two. The first one is Udo Hagen's 9 Questions. Phenomenal. The second one is, you can find it on YouTube. It's a video of Dick Cavett on the Dick Cavett Show interviewing Marlon Brando about why he is the world's best actor. It is phenomenal.
Brilliant. I'm going to have to check that out.
And very uncomfortable for Dick Cavett, by the way. Because
Great.
he was told not to ask that question, and he gets an answer. He gets an answer, all right. It's phenomenal.
Wow. All right. Fifth question. If you had to start your career from scratch, but you still had all the knowledge and experience you've collected from your career in this industry, what would you do or not do? Would you do anything differently, or would you keep it the same?
I think I would keep things the same. I think I would say yes more often or earlier on.
Great. And the last question. What is the golden nugget knowledge drop you've learned from your successful career in this industry you'd like to leave with everyone?
Always be professional, courteous, and always be on time or early. Always.
Absolutely. If you're not early, you're late.
You're late.
That's it. And to wrap up this interview, it is time to give yourself a plug. Where can we find you? How do our listeners connect with you? Is there anything you want to promote?
Yeah, sure. You can follow me on Instagram. It's at Justin M. Sargent. That's at JustinMSargent. And that's really the best way to follow me.
Brilliant. And for everyone listening out there, I have put the link to that in the description of this episode. Justin, thank you so much for being here today. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you.
It was such a pleasure. So great reconnecting with you as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My one call to action for you is to go to youbookeditpodcast.com and join our free email community, where we dig deep into a continually growing resource of truly actionable things you can be doing right now to help advance your entertainment career. Don't miss an episode. We have a new guest 7 days a week. Search for You Booked It on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app and subscribe today. All the best to you. We'll see you tomorrow.